Yeah, this one just came in, has 612 axles. Yeah, DPU's right there. These are insanely long trains. For whatever reason, he's decided to go back into the yard. Another version of Prairie Dogger, I guess. But the takeaway for me is I'm not going to get close enough to that DPU right there to figure out what the heck it really is. Same train, other end of town. All right, if I get what I'm looking for, there will be absolutely no pulls. And if it does pull, it'll pull down into the stump, not up into the log. That's the goal of doing the face cuts the way I'm doing them. Now the lean is that way at the top. This side on the right side is going to be in compression. So the wider the hinge is over there, when it's compressed, that'll tend to keep the tree straight up and down. Not necessarily a bad thing if you're assuming that you want to wedge it over. But if you want it to just drop, you got to thin out those hinges some, but you got to know your wood too, because you don't want it to break and go in the wrong direction. So let's pull the saw out and start cutting on the other side. Well, good morning. It's a chilly morning, central New York. At the edge of fall, getting close to winter, just after Thanksgiving. And it's below freezing. Kind of back to where it should be this time of year. We had a warm snap, I guess, last video or so. And I've got a few trees I want to take down before I start skidding. A few off in that direction, you really can't see through all the rest of it. But continuing in that plus 20 cut, where basically if the trees are less than 20 inches in diameter, about waist high, I'm going to leave them. And unless it's beech. Beech has to come down. It's a weed tree. A lot of firewood in that. Probably going to grab those and bring them north. There's a fella who I've been bringing firewood to. And I don't know. I see a couple trees out that way. I got a skid. But I'd like to get this section of the woods done before snow flies, because I have a pretty steep hill I got to climb to get up and out of here. And even with the tractor chained up, sometimes I have to actually go all the way to the road that way and up and around two sides of a triangle, you know. But let me see what's on my mind this morning. Not much. Get to my age. Simple things for simple minds, I guess. I was alerted to a couple of, I think, pretty neat videos on YouTube where somebody's actually going back and putting numbers to base gasket deletes, the things we've been doing for the last 15, 20 years. And surprise, 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 there's a predictable percentage increase in power across the power band. In all the hue and cry from the porting types to say, oh, it's doing the wrong thing to the port timing and all that. Well, I don't know. I've been saying it for a long time. You want a little more punch in the saw. One of the easiest things you can do is get the compression right. And actually, I'm going to make a comment on that. There's two things about getting the compression right, and there's a lot of ways of doing it. I mean, you can get it on a lathe and trim the base. I do that. You can do a pop-up piston. I do that. Or if you don't want to spend any money, just do a base gasket delete. Pick up, 15 to 20 pounds of pressure. And it has nothing to do with flow and all these things that people want to talk about. It has to do with understanding math. I tried to say it for a long time. It's about math. It's about efficiency. And there's a point of diminishing returns, of course, with compression, but you take a stock saw where the squish band's up around 40 thousandths and you bring it down to 20, you get 3 benefits for the average saw, and you don't have to do a darn thing. The first is, with the increase in compression, there's an increase in efficiency in the actual burn. So per unit gas, oil, air mix, with a little bit more efficiency, you get a little more power. That's number one. And number two, by getting more material out from underneath the actual squish band into the combustion chamber where it can be burned, you get another percentage increase, because there's actually more gas air mix that's burning that's being useful to create power. So that's the second thing. And the third thing is on the port timing, and we've said this for a long time. To add a little bit of power in the bottom end on a smaller saw, not so much the bigger saws, but the smaller ones, if you leave the pressure on the piston top for a little bit longer before it blows out the exhaust, oftentimes you get a little more punch in the bottom end. And when you lower the cylinder, you're lowering both the exhaust and the intake, but also the transfers. And so that means that the pressure is on the pistons for just a little bit longer, especially on small saws. That actually can help. Some saws, the design, it won't work, but oftentimes it will. And also, you're actually increasing the duration of which the intake is open. And in some saws that helps, some saws it hurts. And the one detraction of lowering the cylinder is that you get a less cross-sectional area on the transfer, and there's a real easy way of fixing that too. I might do that just for kicks. I've done it, but I never really show it on video. And I call it the Madsen mod because I first saw that done by Madsen Saws out there in the Pacific Northwest. And what they would do is they would sort of file or machine a channel across the top of the piston, which is why a lot of people won't do it, which basically brings a little bit of the cross section of the piston crown down to the new floor after they've decked the cylinder. They deck them pretty hard, like 30 thousandths. But if you take the width of that transfer and sort of file a channel on the piston crown, where you're basically bringing the crown down by the amount that you've dropped the cylinder, you'll recover that cross-sectional area and the port timing on the transfers. And you lose a little compression and possibly a little bit of scavenge, but I've found over the years that by doing that, it picks up power. So all these things are compromises. You get a loss because of inefficiencies one place, and you pick up power in others. And the game is making it where the modifications have a net positive more than the detractions. And the few things I've done, you've seen on the channel over and over, is increased compression, be it pop-up or base gasket delete or both. Muffler mod to sort of get the heat out. And the other one you've seen a lot, but it's funny, I think it's being rediscovered. It's an old trick. And that's just increasing the diameter of the carburetor. And on the 372s and 365s, I think the last time I did builds, I did the 48 millimeters, but I put the X-Torque carburetor on there. The actual diameter increase is small, but what it does do is it offsets the cross-section that's taken up by choke and throttle plate. So you get a net increase in flow. Even though there's a shoulder where it goes into the intake boot, the net flow is increased, and I've seen just fairly large power increases just by doing that. You add all three of those together, typical guy just with a couple of wrenches can take a stock 372 original edition, the older ones, not the X-Torques. The X-Torques, so what I do is I gut the intake. That's a whole different story to get more flow. But combination of base gasket delete, pop-up, X-Torque carburetor, and you got to modify the intake manifold. You end up with a snappy saw. But there's another thing that you've probably seen on my other builds over time, is all these saws are choked up in the airbox, all of them. So a couple of things I did for fun in a couple of my earlier videos was on the low top 365 or low top John threads, I would cut a hole in the air filter cover and put a large air filter up through that cover. Now I can't use those saws out here. They're not work saws, but for fun, just for making noise and chips fast, that one modification right there, by letting that carburetor breathe, the bigger carb plus the less restriction into the air filter, were two of the most substantial modifications that you could make on that 48 millimeter, but also 50s on those saws. It really matters, But anyway, reel it back. I just find it fun that some of this stuff is being rediscovered. You don't have to send them out to be ground up by some guy with a bunch of letters, trying to brag about what he does for work saws, spend all that money. A lot of these things a guy can do with just a little bit of elbow grease and some tools from Lowe's, a theme that I used to have on my channel when I was doing saws. I haven't done that much now because I've been running the saws. Basically taking the things that I've done with the chainsaws and putting them to work. I always question the guys who espouse to be saw experts that you don't see them cutting any trees. You know what I'm saying? It's kind of like a guy who knows how to build a motorcycle but never raced one. But anyway, I just find it interesting. That's my little thought for the morning. It's not that I really care. It's just, it's like Bob had told me once before when I kept doing those 372 builds. Then I did the 48s and stuff like that. Is it goes, how many of those things can you build? And the answer is, I've done enough, so I've moved on. But back to the base gasket delete. I may do something along those lines to both my 365 and my 585. And the reason is this: it's a subtle one. And yeah, you get a little more punch. And as I was talking in the last video, that whole idea of power delivery and power band, that's what really makes the difference for me on the saws, the configuration as well. But you can do a base gasket delete and not even do a muffler mod. Just leave the muffler stock and still get a punch increase without an increase in noise, because you're focusing on the efficiency. It's not about the flow. It's about making that flow more efficient to create more power per unit volume of flow. So, and I'm trying to go kind of counter to what I've done for years and focus a little bit on just what's it feel like after 6 hours of an old man on a saw. That noise pressure gets to me after a while. So I may try to do some muffler mods a little bit to get heat out more than anything else, but try to mitigate some of the noise. That noise pressure is something that will wear you out. So anyway, just for thought, and I got to stick this saw together and I'll take down a tree. I think I want about 5 more, and then we're going to start pulling. But back to the saws. I mean, that guy there is taking a rest, and I've got my 372, which from a power perspective is really kind of an overachiever. The 585, it's just more displacement, so it's easier. But this one here, the subtle thing that I don't know how to quantify, and you can't do it with dynos and cookie cuts, is it's how it goes onto and off its power band. I think what it is with my slightly ported, that's probably what does it, is the way it climbs onto its power band is a little bit abrupt. But by the same token, when it comes off the power band, it's also just as abrupt. Because what's happened is I've made more horsepower, and I have increased the bottom end, but those saws are kind of peaky from the factory. So yeah, I did focus on compression to sort of increase the lower end a little bit, because I like that. But even in that configuration, it's not as smooth going onto the power curve and off as this one does. And what that does is when you're actually working the saw, is after you run it for a while, you have a sense as to when it's getting too low on the RPMs. It gives you a lot of warning and lets you take the pressure off so it picks up RPMs. Versus on that one there, it doesn't give you much warning. I learned the saw, so after a while it doesn't matter so much. But for example, if I run this saw for a while, or the 585, especially that blue one, and then jump on the 572, I'm stalling that chain all the time because of that transition. You push, and all of a sudden it drops off the power band, chain stops. And part of it's because of the bucking spikes. I did a video on that. But it makes it a little finicky is the right word. Where this one's absolutely not. You get all kinds of warning. It just starts slowing down, It doesn't stall it just starts slowing down. And you get plenty of time to adjust. It's not really all that abrupt. Yeah, it doesn't have as much power, but also part of it's the fact it doesn't have nearly as an aggressive a bucking spike. So what it is the distance between the edge of that, or that bottom spike of the bucking spike, and the center line of the sprocket, where you get more leverage one versus the other to push on that bar, which in turn puts pressure on the chain. So the combination of the power band, a little less aggressive bucking spike, it's a little easier to feel that saw when it's coming off its power band and adjust. Is that leaking in there? Oh no, it's just leaking from the top. But It makes it easier to use. It takes a little bit of pressure off you as the day goes on. And then also having a muffler that's quiet. Man, that really does add up over time for me. Didn't used to, but it does now. And it's a combination of that finicky nature and that noise, along with the handle getting in the way, which put that one into the, you know, the bench versus this one, which is coming out to play. But, you know, the mod part of my background, if I was to do anything to that saw, probably increase the compression and leave the rest of it alone. That's about it. Same with the 585. If I can increase the displacement with a 592 cylinder, I'll do that. And but still leave the muffler. Just let it be. So anyway, I got work to do. Well, I got another big one right here. I hope I have enough gas for it. And what I'd like to do, if I could, is send it right down there. You know, I don't want it. It wants to go over here, and I could probably thread between those two trees, but I don't want to damage those. I want to leave them. If you look at the size of that top, you can probably see here how it wants to go off to my left. But I'm going to leave a little heavy hinge on the right hand side to keep it from breaking. And I'm going to send it right down there. Now, this is yet again, you know, again bending it from where it wants to go. It looks like it might be a pretty high quality tree. I'm going to leave that one, but because of the way those branches are, they're going to toss things back at me. I know it. So I'm going to take off down to that side and see if we can make that work. You know, right down there. Missed this tree, right between these two trees. I think that should be achievable. So let's start. Now I'm thinking again that that's a tapped. I'm thinking that's a tapped tree. So it's not as critical. I mean, it should be a tapped tree. This was part of the old sugar bush. But you know, so I lose 4 foot, but that's a nice log above that. So that's a money tree, even if it's tapped. I think it's a solid looking tree. See if I can get my arms around it. I'm going to say it's probably a 24 inch diameter tree. No, I can't get my arms around it, so it might be a little bit bigger. But see if we can get this one down, and then I'm hungry. I think I'm going to call it a day. Tell you what, this is going to be a wedge job for sure. There's no doubt that this is a wedge. I'm going to have to be careful because not only does it have a lean in the direction the camera's showing right now, but it also leans back towards me a little bit. So I want to push it up and over to go to that spot. And let's see what we got. last tree for that chain. Let's see if we can wedge this one over. Just get a nice close-up of how this is going to work. There it goes. It's a leaner doing what leaners do. You don't want to go. There it goes. Boy, that went perfect. Perfect. Now, I left a lot of hinge intentionally, and I don't know if that's tapped. That's another one. But I got it right down between the two trees. Little thick of a hinge, but it tore down, not up, so I don't care. You know what I'm saying? That chain's so dull. Now, if I had left that hinge all the way across, it would have tore up into the tree like crazy. So even though I left it thick because I had a little bit of a leaner on it, little wedge work, it went over, right? And it was strong enough. So it did, if you look at the way the tree is, you can see how it was leaning off to the left, pretty heavy. That whole top was off to the left. So having a thicker hinge right there, you know, it worked pretty well for me. Now you can tell that that hinge right there was about the right width for a normal tree. It broke nice and clean. That one obviously was thick enough. But there you go. Let's see if I can get the top out of it. And that chain's so whooped, I don't know if I'm going to get any more out of it. It's pretty much done. I don't know, I hit something in here. Well, I'm going to call it a day. It's a half a day. Beautiful day. I got to get in the big tractor and start pulling some of these logs is what I got to do. But that last tree was pretty much at the limit of what this rig right here could handle. Now, I thought it was the chain being a little bit dull. And it might be. But I think that the combination of the chain being off just a little bit and the fact that I don't have the more leverage with the right bucking spikes like I have on that saw, I just couldn't push it hard enough. Couldn't get a bite and push it hard enough. And that cost me time and fuel usage, believe it or not. So yet again, configuration puts those two saws, the 585 and this saw, more in the power curve of the type of saw that I need to do the work I'm doing. That was hard. Now, like I said, I thought that chain was whooped. It's really not. I got out in the other end of it, and it cut like crazy. Nice chips and self-fed right through. Base of the tree of those hard maples. I just didn't have the leverage, power, or stiffness in the suspension to do this. Now, that's another little detail. You know, guys are saying, oh, geez, I want to take a 70cc saw and make it do 80cc type work or 90cc work by modding it. Well, that may be something you might want to do, but the rest of the package has to be up to snuff. Otherwise, you're just wasting your time, to be honest with you. Well, I think I'm going to retire the 565 for this job. I think what that proved is all I'm going to do is beat it up. You know, I need larger bucking spikes and stuff like that, really. It's a sweet saw for most of what I do. Like the ash, it was beautiful. This hard maple, I just think that's a better setup for me. That one and the 585. So I put a new chain on that. And the next set of trees, I'm just going to use this saw. We're going to have the weather turn on us, and I'll probably come out with the tractor so I can let that thing bounce around the cab and get beat up. I don't care. And I'll leave the 585 in the back of the truck unless I can get out here with the truck. This will be the one I use on the tractor. But you know, these are Sugiharas, and believe it or not, they're not that much lighter than the X-Tough, and they're a lot flimsier in terms of they flex a lot more. What happens is, like when the chain gets a little bit on the dull side, that bar flexes. So when I bore cut, sometimes it'll just flex down. Next thing I know, I've got this nice curvature as the bar does like this, takes a dive, and that makes it hard for me to match up to the other side of the tree. So I'm going to run it with a sharp chain and just wear it out. And same concept with that saw is that the wear and tear I can put on that bar and that saw, which I don't care as much about, is wear and tear that I'm not putting on those saws. So with that, I think I'm going to call this a day.